Hi, everybody. This is Mary back here, and I want to talk about a question that I received, which is this. I have a colleague who shows up in most meetings kind of ready to spar, like she's on offense, and it makes me feel tense. Our group had a short conversation about working styles in which she said she likes to be authentic and frank, but I find it exhausting. I'm new to the organization. I'm new to the team. I'm assuming, and wondering if it makes sense to address this, or should I wait for something more tangible to happen? Thank you for this question. This is no, do not necessarily. You do not necessarily want to wait for something more tangible to happen, because especially with a coworker that you're going to be collaborating with pretty closely, you want to go ahead and see what wants to be addressed right off the bat. So this would be an example of a meta conversation. So a meta conversation is a kind of like a how are we type of a conversation. How's our connection? And it's important to start introducing this into a team, even if you're not a leader, even as just a regular power with team member, or in one of those kinds of relationships. There's three good reasons to do this. One is you want to start orienting to the idea that whatever dynamics come up, if we hold them together, it benefits us both, rather than you just trying to take care of only yourself, and them trying to take care of it. There's something really important about actually collaborating relationally, in terms of the team dynamic. Two, for most people, if you leave it be and try to work with it only on your own, your sense of annoyance, your resentment will only increase over time. These feelings come, they're a wake-up call to do something, to tend to a need. There's a need that wants to be addressed in some way. And so when these feelings start to come up, that's usually the time when it's easiest to do that tending. If you wait for longer, there's usually going to be more work. So it's more leveraged to step in with these things on the earlier side. And there's a way to do it. We'll talk about that. But this really, again, these how are we conversations are just as important as having content conversations in meetings. So really getting away, getting your team in a sort of in the habit of starting to think like this is something that you can do right from the get-go. So it will both hopefully help you with this particular dynamic, but at that meta level as well. So first thing I would recommend, so if we were doing coaching on this, and I did coach somebody on a very, very similar thing just the other day, I would just assume that this is only going to be one conversation out of many to come. So you want to do that. You want to make sure that you don't try to lump too many things together. One conversation for just one topic, and for any big topic, you can make the guess that it's going to take some time. So especially with a personality difference, it's just not going to be worked out in one shot. So in this particular case, this person is new on a team. What I would suggest is to focus your main intention on building trust. And you do that by getting a sense of what matters to her. You'll want to go in with some guesses, but it's a win if you can get clearer on what makes her tick at the level of needs, not your diagnoses of her, not your sense of like what's wrong with her and what she should be doing, but sense of what matters to her, what motivates her. And if she can leave with a clearer sense of what motivates you, if this can all happen without that sense of judgment in there, it's going to build more trust. It's going to put some trust capital in your account rather than just continue to withdraw every time there's sort of a prickly moment. So, for example, people who are direct, who are kind of perceived as blunt, or a little too frank, often they see themselves as just trying to be focused and clear and just get right to the point. That's something for them that's about effectiveness, and really framing it that way for yourself, like, oh, they care about effectiveness, which I do too, gives you that point of connection that is much more helpful to kind of draw on once you get into the into the level of the nuances of, just kind of what sorts of dynamics will support you in showing up with in creating a more robust collaboration. So you mentioned working styles in the question, and there are absolutely different personality types and working styles. So here's the thing with that. This is something that in the Enneagram framework, I like to talk a lot about. There's the intensity types, which this person that that the reader's asking the question about may be one of. And there's the positive outlook types. There's these different triads, and I don't know for sure who's in what triad based on just this tiny bit of information, but people who are, for example, in the intensity types may be just as likely to think that the other types just, really need to be more assertive as it's like that makes just as much sense as, I need to be softer. It's like, well, maybe you need to be a little more firm and a little bit more direct, right? So when you want to look at these things that might come down to personality differences, what makes the most sense to me is to start by looking at where you're telling yourself judgments or shoulds about their behaviors and start doing some translations. So there's a couple I'm going to make a guess at myself. This is just for the sake of working through the example. Say I notice myself, I'm hearing myself tell myself that she should be more attuned, that not everything's a fight. She doesn't need to make everything so intense. And the way that I like to do my first set, this actually takes care of several translations all in one, is by looking at feelings and needs, mine and hers. And this is very basic nonviolent communication. Tom Bond calls this the T-chart. It's kind of my adaptation of a T-chart. But some of my students call this a Punnett square. But we're looking at feelings and needs, both mine and hers. And I actually recommend you taking the time to fill this out before you go into a first conversation with somebody, or really any difficult conversation, just to see if you can start to translate some of the judgments into feelings and needs. So you mentioned being exhausted, so you're feeling tired, tense, uncomfortable, right? And needing ease, harmony, maybe softness. So I usually write 2 or 3 and sometimes circle and see which one rises to the top. But sometimes for more complicated ones, you can have quite a list there, and then you'll just put a star next to the top 2 or 3 after you've done that. So then you're going to go through with her. And there could be any number of things that are true, and you'll start to find out when you actually begin to talk. But go in with a guess. Go in with something that that gives you a framework that's not about a judgment. So maybe she's anxious. She might have some stress or anxiety or worry that that sort of promotes a defensiveness. Even though you kind of described it as being on offense. Maybe she's impatient. Maybe she's feeling like, let's move it along. Come on, chop, chop, right? Maybe the feeling here for her is engaged and content. Maybe she's just fine with how she shows up and sees no issue with it at all. I would kind of just like make some of these guesses about what's motivating her and what needs would those lead to. So efficiency, you mentioned authenticity, so she values that. So that's one for sure here in the needs column. Competence, mattering. Sometimes people that have that energy of like, I need to get my point through, they really want to be heard, or they want to know that they matter, that that their contributions are seen. And if you can go in with some of that in mind, when she starts talking, you'll be able to kind of narrow down like, oh yeah, there really is something about mattering for her. Okay, and that'll inform what you say moving forward. The last thing is find the observables. So this is another translation that's so key is, being brusque, being frank, being intense. That's the one that I added in. These are all judgments, and they might be true. They might be correct. She might even agree with some of these labels, but they're all in the NVC construct under the form of evaluations, interpretations, judgments. So find the observable, and the observable might be, I'm tense. I notice, I notice contraction every time we start to begin one of these particular kinds of meetings, or every time we have a one-on-one. I don't know what the situation is specifically. So I'm tense, or I'm uncomfortable, or in these meetings, maybe here's an observation. Everybody talks and we don't get through all of our agenda items because of how many opinions are being shared. These are things that are more observational, and you want to find those because those will be a lot easier for you both to agree upon and work from. So again, I would say, I don't know how to label it. Brusque or prickly to one person in a room might just be about a great, really stimulating discussion to another. So here's some verbiage that I might start with, or include in the conversation. I just know I feel tense and drained after some of our team meetings, and I'm just trying to be curious about it. What do you notice? After I said what I did, does any of this resonate for you? Do you also feel that way, or, is it different on your side? I want our collaboration to get more and more robust over time. And so I wanted to name some of my thoughts explicitly so that we could work together, and hold it, both of us, ideally, right? So these are some of the ways that you can begin to address it. I think that some of the reasons people will say, don't go into these difficult conversations unless there's a really good reason is because they don't have the sense of how these types of things can be framed in such a way that they're connecting rather than creating more judgments, more rifts. You want to look at where you have a hard to hear message, where you're attributing something to them rather than taking ownership of it. If I'm just naming it as, I'm uncomfortable and I want to feel more ease in our collaboration. I want to look forward to our meetings more. We're going to be working together every day on X, Y, or Z project. I'd like to have some sense of us each knowing where we both stand. That's why I'm bringing this up. So all of this is framed, it's in service of the collaboration. It's in support of what I know we both care about, rather than I'm going to come here and ask you to change and tell you what needs to be different. How you made me uncomfortable, without going ahead and taking responsibility here. So that's all for now. Leave your questions, comments below. And hey, while you're here with me, make sure that we've connected on this page and you've joined our Facebook group, the Conscious Communication in the Workplace group, and we'll be doing more of the Q&A and the coaching there. I hope you have a great day. Thanks.